Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 825 for the 28th of July, 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you from a overcast, slightly sunny, slightly cloudy, and very windy Sydney, Australia. Yesterday morning I woke up to thunder, a bit unusual. And as I wake up this morning, I see that Australia has got off to a flying start in the Olympic Games. Coming up on this week's show, for crying out loud, it's Kat McLeod. Kat's going to tell us about the recent Global Skeptics in the Pub, a 24-hour Zoom meeting that transitioned around the world from time zone to time zone, with skeptics dropping in and dropping out, having discussions and giving talks. Some people stayed on for a very long time, including Kat herself. She's going to tell us all about that, and also included is a quick interview with some of the participants. As the crows are crowing outside the window. Crows? That's unusual. Normally it's the rainbow lorikeets around here and the cockatoos. Following that, it's the return of Maynard's spooky action. And recently, Maynard interviewed the one and only George Hrab from the Geologic Podcast. An extensive interview, a long interview, which is available at maynard.com.au. But what we're going to play today are some edited highlights where George talks about skepticism and critical thinking. Now, his podcast has been going even longer than the Skeptic Zone. It's quite impressive. George Hrab with Maynard coming up a bit later on in the show. Then to round off this week's episode, the Trove segment looks at something you really don't see or hear about much anymore, although it used to be a big fad some years ago. Firewalking. Firewalking. Would you walk across a pit of hot coals? Well, those people who live in Australia, especially if you're near the coast, and you might pop down to the beach for a swim in the middle of summer on a blazing hot day. You'll know how hot the sand gets. And especially if I'm talking to students about firewalking here in this part of the world, I remind them of the times they've gone to the beach on a blazing hot day and they've tried to walk across the sand, and they can make it 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, and that's it, because the sand will burn your feet. It's a great way to talk about firewalking because the physics is sort of the same. Anyway, firewalking in the pages of Australian newspapers and other sources. We have some archived material that's come into my possession recently for archiving purposes. Now, as mentioned on last week's episode, the Bent Spoon Awards are open. The nominations are open for this year's Bent Spoon Award, presented to the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle. It's been awarded now 40 plus years. Anyway, if you know somebody in Australia making outrageous claims when it comes to pseudoscience or the paranormal along those lines, you can nominate them for the Bent Spoon. But I will read you the current list of nominees. And I'll be linking to this page in the show notes so you too can add your nomination. Okay, we have 3 so far. Nomination number 1, Ross Coulthart, nominated by various people for suggesting during a 1.5-hour presentation to the Scientific Coalition of UFO Studies convention in May-June that former President Donald Trump fears for his life if he spills the beans on what he knows about UFOs or UAPs. Quote, he's scared. He's scared they're going to kill him. That's what I've been told. I'm not kidding you. I'm not making this up. This is serious. End quote. It turns out that Mr. Trump has more down-to-earth reasons to fear for his safety. Coulthart also was the recipient of the Bent Spoon Award last year. Nomination number 2, Cale O'Donnell, nominated by Richard Saunders. Cale O'Donnell boasts via his website that he is, quote, Australia's #1 medium, end quote. Many have in the past, and continue to this day, to claim the same title. He makes use of a spirit box to hear messages from the dead, even though this device, a modified radio, has been thoroughly debunked and explained by skeptical organisations. Australian skeptics offered O'Donnell the $100,000 challenge in 2023, but so far he has not responded. Nomination number 3. Channel 7 News and News Director Anthony DeSegli, nominated by various people, for introducing an astrology segment in the nightly news bulletin. Vague and vapid advice from Astro Tash, real name Natasha Weber, is played by way of infographics before the evening weather forecast. We note that this nomination is not aimed at the professional news gatherers at the network who take news and current affairs seriously. And a quick overview of some of the winners of the Bent Spoon Award over the years. Well, the aforementioned Ross Coulthart won it last year. In years previous, we've had Pete Evans, the former TV celebrity chef. He's not the only person who's won the award twice for various pseudoscientific ideas and alt-med ideas. The Australian television program Medicine or Myth, for promoting certain alternative medicines uncritically. 10 years ago, it was Dr. Larry Marshall, Chief Executive of the CSIRO, a government scientific organisation for supporting water divining. The Chiropractors Association has won. Fran Sheffield of Homeopathy Plus for advocating the use of magical sugar water in place of tried and true vaccinations for many deadly diseases, notably whooping cough. And going back almost 20 years, we've had the ABC, the television, the broadcaster here, for a television program called Second Opinion, which uncritically presented many forms of quackery. Exactly 20 years ago, in 2004, it was the ABC television, ABC again, for the television program The New Inventors, for giving consideration to an obvious piece of pseudoscience, and that was a device that was for swimming pools. Going back to the turn of the century, we had Jasmaheen, who was claiming at the time she could live without food and water, a breatharian. And going back into the 1980s, we had Anne Dankbar, an Adelaide psychic who thought she discovered the Colossus of Rhodes, I think off the coast of Australia or something like that. We had in 1986 Peter Brock, the famous, very famous and wonderful, amazing racing car driver. Unfortunately, he fell prey to the orgone energy promoters, and he was selling a device you put in your car to make your car run faster or better or more economically using orgone energy, which is a mystical, magical, non-existent energy. And of course, there are many others, and you can read all about those past winners. And I will add a link in this week's show notes. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. Enough with the bent spoon. It's time for me to run downstairs and maybe have a nice slice of cheesecake. How about that? While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
For crying out loud. It's Kat McLeod. On July 19th, I had the pleasure of attending a Global Skeptics in the Pub, which was organized as part of the SkeptiCal Conference. However, this event was free to everyone. The first ever Global Skeptics in the Pub was held on Zoom and began at 7 p.m. local time in New Zealand and ended at 9 p.m. local time in Hawaii, 24 hours later on the same calendar day. Hosting duties were passed off to different organizations and countries as a new time zone ushered in 7 p.m. David Allen Smith did an incredible job of recruiting and coordinating 49 different skeptical organizations across 22 different countries over 24 time zones to make the event happen. Being one who suffers from FOMO, the fear of missing out, I decided to tune in when New Zealand was hosting, and of course I had to stick around to see my friends from the Skeptic Zone when Australia joined in at 3 a.m. my time. There were so many wonderful discussions on a plethora of topics. A few organizations even made short presentations. Our very own Richard Saunders shared a short video of some riveting investigative journalism done by Maynard and Tim Mendham. It was interesting to hear about the struggles everyone seems to be having when it comes to maintaining and building the skeptical community in their area, and the lasting effects that the pandemic has had. A recurring topic was also trying to attract a wider, younger skeptical audience. Some groups joined in from pubs, while others, like myself, joined in from home. Several people popped in and out throughout the day and were able to chat with skeptics from Russia, Hong Kong, the Czech Republic, South Africa, Kenya, Turkey, all across Europe, the UK, and of course, North America. I spoke with some attendees after the conference about their Global Skeptics in the Pub experience, including the well-known skeptic Rob Palmer, the delightful Celestia Ward from Squaring the Strange, and one of the conference organizers, Deborah Warkin, and I can share with you some of our impromptu chat. Well, this has been an absolutely awesome conference. I loved every minute of it, and it kicked off, of course, with the Global Skeptics in the Pub, which some people attended for an hour or two, and some attended for a lot longer. Does anyone here want to tell me about their experience with the Global Skeptics in the Pub and what takeaways you may have had from that?
I was so bummed I had to leave for a period of time because I had to make a recycling run because my son was coming to help me clear the deck. And so I missed the East Coast people. And of course, unlike Kat, I had to sleep.
I did take a wee cat nap.
I got there late. I was only really there for the last hour and a half. In fact, it was one of the things that made me decide to go ahead and buy a pass to SkeptiCal. Because I hadn't, I usually have a lot of things going on over the weekend and was able to see some messages about the Global Skeptics in the Pub. And I said, I want to do that. And you know what? I still have time today, even though it's like almost 11 p.m. I went ahead and bought my pass and I joined up and I got to see the room turn slowly to all Aussies and Kiwis by the time midnight rolled around.
It was wonderful seeing everybody come on board.
I'm glad you did that, Celestia, but you didn't have to get a pass for the Skeptics in the Pub because that part was free. But it's good that you got a whole conference admission.
Well, yeah, I like to support. If I'm going to come in and enjoy, I'd like to support the whole thing.
And it was very reasonably priced.
It was, indeed.
Even for those of us outside of America. Rebecca, did you attend at all?
As I said earlier, I went to the 3 o'clock. Well, it was the opening hour, which for me was 3 to 4. And I had to be up early for a class a couple of hours after I went to bed. So the rest of the weekend, I've been a little bit out of it, in and out. But it was well worth it. I mean, I really loved it. It was so cool. Here I am, 3 o'clock in the morning, and talking to people in New Zealand and Canada and the West Coast, and some of whose names I'd heard before, but have never had the chance to meet or anything. So it was pretty exciting. I wish I could have come back in, but I was just too out of it the next day.
I spent quite a lot of time, again, not half as much as Kat, but I was on as soon as I could reasonably drag myself out of bed. And I think that was the time when India was supposed to take it, but for some reason they didn't show up. But there was somebody else held the host. That might have been Australia was holding it at the time, and then it went through England and Malta. I didn't even remember where Malta was. And there was the South African Secular Society. That was fascinating. Then there was a bunch of people from Belgium Austria, Hungary, and it went around the world. There was, let's see, somebody from Spain. Argentina, for some reason, did not connect, although they were supposed to. Then it was back to the US and Canada, and it swept across North America back to the New Zealand Skeptics. I was on from most of that, on and off. It was quite fascinating.
It was wonderful to see the people that started it in New Zealand and Australia coming back once they woke up.
Right. Unlike you, they went to bed and got up.
I really liked hearing what other groups were doing.
I thought it was fascinating to hear about how so many of us are having the same struggles, regardless of what country we're in, as far as getting people back in person and rebuilding the communities and the effect that the pandemic has had on everybody.
Yeah, that was a big ongoing subject. And I mentioned during one of those topics that Susan Garbick has been charged by the CFI, at least, of getting that going again in the United States. But that needs to be done all around the world because apparently everyone's having the same problem. The pandemic killed off people's involvement in all sorts of clubs, including skeptic clubs, and it's hard to get people back.
Well, thank you so much for all of your input. Rob Homer, Celestia Ward, Janine Denoma, and Rebecca Lawson. So, sorry if you missed out this time, but I'm sure another event like this will happen again, as it was a great success. Signing off from Edmonton, Canada, this is Kat McLeod.
It feels like every family has one.
You can summon aliens with your mind. The only reason why we can't see them is because we're impure and they're pure.
They might be your parents, your siblings, your cousins, and your friends.
Look, she believes that lizard people are walking on the face of the earth.
They might be your teachers, your police officers, and your lawyers.
It's just like, if you disagree with us, there are going to be severe consequences.
They could even be your elected representatives.
Everyone is out to get you. Everyone with the PhD and MD, everyone in the government is out to get you personally.
We watched them storm the Capitol of the United States.
I mean, if I'd have told you on January 5th that any group of people would try to overthrow the U.S. government, you said, no, of course not.
We saw them occupy Ottawa.
Scientific proof that racism doesn't exist. Their sources are always, trust me, bro.
But what no one is talking about is how they're destroying relationships.
I don't think people realize how damaging it is to families.
They are QAnon, and these are the stories of the people who love them.
Like, if I play into their fantasies, I can make them believe anything I want.
Look for the Q Dropped podcast on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube, or go to porthosmedia.net/QDropped.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance. In the Thermopylae of modern life, occasionally you encounter someone who's beyond a journeyman, way past a Renaissance man. In fact, he's gone straight through the Renaissance, leapt over the Napoleonic Wars, and now has his head currently right up the Jazz Age. I first met and listened to George Hrab in 2010 when he was still a teenager. His podcast, the Geologic Podcast, once you get over the fact he never once mentioned igneous rocks, it's actually a pretty good bath time listening for the filthy. His latest funk fest of an album, Terpsichore, despite being named after the Olivia Newton-John character in Xanadu, has not one single reference to roller skating. So make welcome the overly talented, poly-everything, critical thinking adjacent, musician, podcaster and hotfoot dancer from stage and screen, and YouTube, the ingenue of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, George Hrab.
I'm smiling ear to ear. That's so generous. Thank you. Good evening to you. Good morning to me. We're managing to talk to each other on the opposite sides of the day, which is so lovely.
About 3 a.m. for musician time for you, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. I had a lovely 3-hour-long rehearsal last night, got home, collapsed, and prepared myself, put myself into an REM dream state to get ready for this interview. My alpha waves are all where they're supposed to be, so hit me.
But there's a few things I want to ask you of a skeptical nature, because Richard Saunders wants to use this on the Skeptic Zone. And you've been touring around the Spectacles Guide to the Universe people. They're great performers, but you've got the bit of the showbiz there to hold it together. Is that what's going on?
I think I am the entertainment avocado. In that skeptical scientific burrito, I really get to channel my combination of Bill Nye the Science Guy and Alex Trebek. And they're coming up on their 1,000th episode, Maynard. We're doing a live 5-hour event. We'll be doing a full 1,000th episode retrospective that's just going to dive into the archives and some special guests and some great surprises. Almost 20 years they've been doing it. I mean, talk about the gold standard. They're just wonderful. Each of them provides just the right amount of what they provide.
Got a couple of critical thinking skeptical questions for you.
Sure.
Reaction videos. I don't understand why watching a video of someone reacting to a video often that you've seen, what is the point of that?
I thought that at first too. And I think what it does is it provides you a sense of affirmation so that when you're watching and you know what's going to happen, you hope the person's going to react in the way that you hope they're going to react. And when they do, it affirms that the thing you like or the thing you've recognized or the thing you enjoy is of value. I think you get to relive that very first moment of discovery through another person. I think that's the appeal. So yeah, it's weird, but I get it.
The great George Hrab in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, although he has not gone to the Bethlehem Inn at Christmas in a donkey costume and asked to see if there's any room yet. I keep daring you to do that every year.
One of these years, you know what? I'll film it and then we'll have a reaction video to it. We'll show it to you and we'll film you seeing it and we'll see what it looks like.
Maynard International Studios here is just held together with string, but at your place there in Bethlehem, you've removed all the carpet from your floor. Is that because you like echo in the house or you got a high heels thing going on?
Mostly, I just like to wear tap shoes casually.
Oh, fair.
So just, during the day, I just like to wear tap shoes and then occasionally we'll do a little Fred Astaire move here and there. The carpet that was in here had been in here for a number of years. And so I think the person that lived here before me was a vivisectionist. I removed all the carpets. It gives you that nice hip industrial look that all the kids are crazy about nowadays.
Critical thinking questions here. Do you think you can actually do successful pre-bunking?
I think so. It depends on how it's done. Again, if it's done in the context of a joke or of a song, it tends to be stickier. It tends to stay with you better. Pre-bunking is more effective if it's done the right way than debunking, again, depending on what the topic is. When something confirms someone's beliefs, that's very difficult to pre-post retro bunk on any level. So that's the hardest thing is you have to change the person's core beliefs, which is really challenging. Okay, if someone says this, just think to yourself, and then that can kind of at least provide a little bit of a pre-bunk wedge into that doorway towards critical thinking.
You're a center of it there in America at the moment. Watching from the outside, it looks like you guys are heading for some sort of civil war.
That is sort of the feel that's happening now, but a civil war takes effort. And if there's something that the American public is not quite so famous at, it's effort. A mass effort. And the people that tend to scream about civil war and the people that tend to be armed to the teeth couldn't do a push-up. So just from a cardiovascular standpoint, a civil war is really taxing. It would be a very quick flare-up and then be just like, oh, this is exhausting. Oh, God, yeah, I'm just going to sit back down. If anything, we've insured ourselves from a civil war because of all the sugary snacks that we enjoy as a country. What amazes me that someone can be incredibly credulous on one side of their brain and be very incredulous on another and very skeptical on another, because everybody's capable of being very skeptical. Everybody has expertise in something. Everybody's an expert at something. What do they say? Whenever you see something shown in a movie or on television, whatever that thing may be, whatever that expertise may be, if it's a car mechanic, if it's a surgeon, if it's a musician, if it's a podcaster, the people that actually do that thing will spot all the stuff that's being presented incorrectly.
Yeah, well, if you see a podcaster going to a mechanic, that's ridiculous. How do they get the money for a car?
Then it's just exactly. How do they even own a car, let alone fix one?
Tell people where we can experience the world of George Hrab. And I do love it when you pop up on my Christmas shows, when you pop up on my live streams unexpectedly and give me dressing tips.
That to me is it's become a part of the holiday season I look forward to, just knowing that I have to come up with something for the big Maynard special. We just revamped GeorgeHrab.com, so it's brand new. And what's lovely is that connects very directly to my Bandcamp, which has all of my lyrics, all of my albums, all the information you could possibly need, all the YouTube links and all that kind of stuff is there. If you just Google my name, like I say, Hrab, it's unique enough that the first 47,000 things are me. So yay.
Hallo an alle Zuhörer aus Deutschland und natürlich alle Zuhörer aus aller Welt, die Deutsch sprechen. Obwohl dieser Podcast Englisch ist, hoffe ich, dass ihr trotzdem Freude daran habt, die Interviews und Meldungen anzuhören. Ihr könnt mehr über diesen Podcast auf www.skepticzone.tv erfahren. Time once again to go back to the archives, no matter where we find them, the digital archives of newspapers, magazines, clippings. Clippings, that's a word you don't hear much anymore. From our history when it comes to matters of interest to skeptics. Our favourite place is Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, but of course we go further afield, and this week we're looking at something you really don't see too much of anymore. It was a fad for a while, some decades ago. That is firewalking. Now, you may remember firewalking. You may have heard about it, that it was very popular with certain motivational speakers. They would charge you lots of money to attend their weekend course of motivation. You're the best person on the planet. You can do it. Rah, 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 that sort of thing. And at the end, they would build a big pit of fire, hot coals. And once the fires died down and there were just embers and coals left, you would march across, feeling that you have put mind over matter. And somehow your belief in yourself and how good you are and everything's fine can magically circumvent the laws of physics. Now, over the years, many skeptics have demonstrated firewalking to show that it's not mind over matter. It's a simple matter of physics. The Mythbusters famously did an episode where they constructed a fire pit to test this out. Richard Wiseman, my friend Professor Richard Wiseman, many years ago, nearly a quarter of a century ago, I think, demonstrated this on the BBC. But to give you an idea, he gathered some gurus or firewalkers at the time who insisted it was mind over matter. And all Richard did was have a extra long fire pit constructed. And he said that what would happen, according to the laws of physics, is the firewalkers would get so far, then the accumulation of all the heat they were absorbing through the soles of their feet would get too much and they would jump off. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. The first time I saw that particular video was in the year 2000 at the Skeptics World Convention here in Sydney. But let's start off at the Skeptics Dictionary and see what it has to say about firewalking. Firewalking refers to the activity of walking on hot coals, rocks, or cinders without burning the soles of one's feet. In some cultures, for example India, firewalking is part of a religious ritual and is associated with mystical powers of the fakirs. In America, firewalking is part of the New Age religion. For example, self-empowerment, motivational activity. Tony Robbins popularized firewalking as an activity for demonstrating it is possible for people to do things that seem impossible to them. The firewalk is a technique for turning fear into power. Robbins doesn't consider the power of the mind to overcome fear of getting burnt as paranormal, however. Overcoming this fear is presented as a step in reconstructing one's mind almost as if this trial by fire was some sort of initiation into an esoteric and very special group of risk-takers. To the timid and those who feel powerless amongst all the dramatic firebrands around them, such a feat as walking on hot coals must seem a significant event. It goes on to say later in the article, walking across hot coals without getting burnt does seem impossible to many people, but in fact it is no more impossible than putting your hand in a hot oven without getting burnt. As long as you keep your hand in the air and don't touch the oven, its metal racks or any ceramic or metal pots, you won't get burnt even if the oven is extremely hot. Or, if you do touch the oven, metal racks or pots and are wearing insulating gloves or using hot pads, you won't get burnt. Why? Because the air has a low heat capacity and poor thermal conductivity, while our bodies have a relatively high heat capacity. And an insulator will insulate. Thus, even if the coals are very hot, 1,000 to 1,200 degrees, it doesn't specify here Fahrenheit or Celsius, but I don't think it matters, a person with normal soles won't get burnt as long as he or she doesn't take too long to cross the coals, and as long as the coals used do not have a very high heat capacity. Volcanic rock and certain wood embers will work just fine. It also goes on to say, nevertheless, some people do get burnt while walking across coals, not because they lack faith or willpower, but because the coals are too hot, or they have a relatively high heat capacity, or because the firewalker's soles are thin, or he doesn't move quickly enough. And I would add to that, in the case of Richard Wiseman and his experiments, the firewalkers were walking for too long, thus giving the heat time to accumulate. The bottom line here is that there is nothing mystical about firewalking, even though it looks spectacular. Now, if you go to the Skeptic magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics, freely available for you to download online, look up volume 13, number 4, and on page 10, there's a report by Barry Williams called Hot Feet, F-E-A-T, Not So Hot. And this talks about various tests held by the Australian skeptics over the years. And some 10, 15 years ago, I helped Dr. Karl Firewalking do a firewalking here in Sydney at Sydney University for a television show he was doing at the time. My good friend Dr. Steve Roberts came up from Melbourne, and together the two of us constructed a fire pit. And very lucky for us, after Dr. Karl filmed his segment, Walking Across the Fire Pit, the crew let us bystanders, and indeed me, who helped make the pit, walk across. So I have footage of me walking across a pit of fires, which was an interesting experience. Now, I referred to a flyer written by the Victorian Skeptics, circa 2005, 2006, I think, something like that. And it says, firewalking. What is firewalking? Typically, firewalking involves walking with bare feet across a level bed of hot glowing coals, the remnant of a wood fire. On the Pacific Islands, heated stones are substituted for coals. What are the claims? Firewalking is often claimed to be an example of mind over matter. Mystical mental powers are supposed to enable a person to block out the pain associated with the intense heat. These powers are supposed to prevent the foot from burning. Participants at mental powers workshops often pay hundreds of dollars to be taught these ancient mental techniques that allow them to defy the laws of nature. And the rest of the flyer goes on to talk about the laws of physics and the conductivity of heat. And with a big thank you to skeptic Peter Hogan in Victoria, who had some archives, which I have been digitizing. We have a flyer here, I believe around the same era, so mid-2000s or possibly even earlier. And it says here, The Red Hot Miracle Man. About your firewalking teacher, Paul Blackburn. That's an appropriate name, isn't it? A former high school teacher in Sydney's western suburbs, Paul moved into personal development in the early 1980s and taught many different motivational courses. Quote, "But after 6 years, I began looking for something to provide a fast-track breakthrough for people keen on blasting their way to success. I wanted to see people permanently changed by one powerful experience." End quote. Wow, this is vintage motivational word salad, isn't it? After attending firewalking seminars in Texas, America, where else, Paul realized firewalking offered people dramatic, indisputable proof that their mind controlled their body and all physical limitations could be overcome. Goodness. Quote, "When you walk on fire, all your limitations fall away. Your entire life experience changes for the better." End quote. Paul suggests people walk on fire barefoot without burning because of the ability of the subconscious to rearrange the body's energy fields. 40-year-old Paul is married with 2 young daughters. In the past 4 years, he's travelled the world from his property just out of Canberra, teaching others to firewalk. He harbours a burning passion. You can't make this up. He harbours a burning passion to help others journey beyond mediocrity and discover their full, exciting, unlimited potential. I wish I had unlimited, exciting potential. Your firewalking adventure, the details. You don't need to bring anything, just a smile and a readiness for amazing self-empowerment. Come as you are. Your firewalking session will start at 7:45 p.m. at the location advertised. Now, this is very important to note that firewalking is usually done at night because it looks more dramatic. You can see the coals glowing. In the middle of a bright day, even though the coals would be the same temperature, it's not nearly so spectacular. We read on. First, Paul leads the group through 3 hours of intense psychological and physical preparation. Good grief. You'll develop your own personal war cry or mantra and chant to learn the special Firewalker's Stomp. As well, you write all your fears on a chock of scrap timber. Fears of rejection, failure, success, divorce, whatever. Then cast them into the flames. Wow, what a marvelous feeling. I wonder if he provided marshmallows for toasting at the same time. That's quite nice. We promise the exhilaration and transformation you'll experience after your firewalk will be the experience of your life. What's to fear after a firewalk? You'll receive 2 live-action photos to record your success forever. Then you'll enjoy barbecued. Then you'll enjoy barbecued sausages cooked on the glowing coals. Then you'll enjoy barbecued sausages cooked on the glowing coals of your conquered fears. Oh dear. You've truly turned your fears into nourishment for your body. All-inclusive investment for your firewalk, $165. And at the bottom in big writing, yes, you're a firewalker now. Your life will never be the same. Oh, wow, I feel quite ripped off. When I did firewalking, I didn't get a sausage. Nothing, not even a marshmallow. And we also have here another fly, which appears to be probably the reverse of the fly we just read on the other side. Transform your life in just 3 hours. Turn your life fears into power. With a dramatic photograph here of people firewalking. Feel all your limitations drop away in 3 hours. Prove to yourself you can do anything. Blast your way to a spectacular new level of achievement. Enjoy a thrilling new adventure in your life. Break out of your rut for good. A blaze of excitement, and you'll never be the same again. Realize your mind controls your body 100%. Set fire to your limiting beliefs. Come firewalking with Paul Blackburn in Melbourne, November 5th, crossed out and written in pen, 12th. And again, thanks to the archives kept by Peter Hogan in Victoria, in Melbourne, we have a clipping here from the Courier from Ballarat, Victoria, dated Monday the 7th of February, 1994. So it's possible what I've been reading to you now is somewhat older than I suspected. And the reproduction here is mostly okay, so we'll read this. It says, skeptics prove their point. Amateurs walk across a bed of hot coals. And this is a story by Joanne Collins. Walking across a bed of hot coals may seem crazy, but to the Australian skeptics, it's harder work digging the pit. I can attest to that. 6 skeptic members, including University of Ballarat psychology lecturer Margot Murphy, took what appeared to be 4 painless steps across a 3-metre pit of hot coals at Ballarat City Oval on Saturday night, even though they were quick ones. The philosophy behind the stunt is simple. You don't need a psychic ability to be able to achieve certain things. To prove its point, the group offered $30,000 to anyone willing to walk on a hot plate the same temperature as the coals. Quote, because if they can do that, they have psychic powers, end quote. Australian skeptics investigate the paranormal and people that claim to have qualities such as miraculous healing powers. Quote, there are people in Ballarat charging up to $200, claiming they can teach people how to walk on fire, and yet we can do it and we're just like anyone else, end quote, said Skeptics member Mr. Joseph after walking across the coals. His argument proved correct, as several onlookers, including a 12-year-old girl, took the plunge. Courier photographer Lindell Flintoff was another participant and could not resist the challenge, even though she winced a little after the event. Mr. Joseph said the event was a practice run for February 19, when Olympic marathon runner Ballarat's Steve Moneghetti braves his precious feet to walk on the coals. Quote, Steve has agreed to do it because he does not believe in silly things, and the message with using someone like Steve is that he is a man who relies on his feet for a living, so he wouldn't be that silly if he knew it would damage his feet, end quote, Mr. Joseph said. Moneghetti's coach, Chris Wardlaw, has also agreed to participate. Quote, there's not a criteria for walking on coals, you just have to know what you're doing, and there is no naked flame allowed, end quote, he said. Before Moneghetti walks on the coals at the City Oval, Skeptics members will hold a 1-hour seminar on, quote, reasons to be skeptical, end quote, at 7 p.m. Mr. Joseph said there would be an open invitation for firewalking on the night. And here's a report from the Herald Sun Sunday. On Sunday, February the 20th, 1994, Moneghetti hot-foots it, with a picture of Steve Moneghetti walking across the coals. And this is by Lyndall Johnson. Quote, it's easy, not even as hot as walking on hot concrete, end quote. That's what marathon runner Steve Moneghetti had to say after walking across a 600-degree pit of embers in Ballarat last night. With trousers rolled up, a quick wave to the more than 300 onlookers, Mona, and that was his nickname, took 4 steps across the 3-metre pit. The stunt went without a hitch. Unlike Adelaide Crows, and that's a football team, star Nigel Smart, who last year burnt his feet so badly he had to take a couple of months off football. But the Aussie marathon champ, who last week hot-footed his way to victory in the prestigious Tokyo Marathon, said it was all a matter of, quote, scientific logic, end quote. Quote, it's all to do with the heat transference from the charcoal. It takes a while for the heat to be transferred from the coals to your feet, end quote, said Moneghetti, who was joined in the show at the Ballarat Oval by his coach and former Olympic marathoner, Chris Wardlaw. Quote, as long as you don't stand still and there is no metal in it, then you shouldn't get burnt, end quote. Moneghetti said he had no connection with the firewalk organisers, the Australian Skeptics, and was motivated to firewalk by his job as a maths and science teacher. Before taking the walk, Moneghetti said he was not worried he might ruin his running career. But he added, quote, "I'm not as nervous as before running an Olympic marathon, but the more people ask me if I am, the more I think about it," end quote. According to the Australian Skeptics, the night proved people do not need special powers to walk on fire. Quote, "People get duped into paying $160 for a 3-hour course in walking on hot embers," end quote, said Australian Skeptics President Adam Joseph. And I think he was the president of the Victorian branch at the time. Quote, "Some people pay between $200 and $600 for a weekend course to attain a level of personal development of the higher self, and are told that if they achieve that, they can walk on fire. What we have shown is that anyone can do it," end quote. More than 100 people joined in a 3-metre firewalk, and only a small number admitted they suffered burns to their feet. Oh dear. Quote, "It's not totally risk-free, but it's generally safe," end quote, said Mr. Joseph. Quote, "It's like driving a car. If you are silly, you are going to get hurt. Otherwise, as long as you know what you are doing, you'll be right," end quote. Moneghetti said he was setting his sights on the Commonwealth Games in August and then the Olympic Games in Atlanta in 1996. He said his run in Tokyo showed he was back in top form after a couple of years of struggling due to, quote, "distractions and other commitments," end quote. And the photograph accompanying the caption of Steve Moneghetti on the hot coals, "Steve Moneghetti makes his walk last night." And to round off, I'll let you know that a follow-up is included in the pages of the Skeptic magazine, this time volume 14, number 1. In the news segment here, it says News, Olympian braves the coals. And it's a report about the night. So there we are, a bit of a blast in more than one ways from the past. Firewalking. Again, you don't hear about it much anymore. 20, 30 years ago, it was the fashion, it was the fad for motivational speakers to run courses at the end of which you could walk on fire. My goodness me. But you too can hot-foot it to your local library or indeed to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Have a look through the digital archives, because you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast, and thank you very much to all those wonderful Patreon and PayPal supporters who contribute regularly via micropayments or contributions that keep the show going. And those people also who sometimes are very generous with one-off contributions. I'm glad you enjoy the show. Apparently so do many other people, which is very, very nice for myself and the team at the Skeptic Zone to hear. Coming up on next week's show, I think we might have something from those loons from Canada. Oh, those loons from Canada. Kate and Ali. And just before I go, and we were speaking about Global Skeptics in the pub earlier in the show with Kat McLeod, as part of the Australian contribution, Maynard, Tim Mendham, Suyarachi and I made a series of silly, funny videos all about the hunt for the elusive drop bear. And I will link to that video in this week's show notes. It was fun to play that to the pub goers at the Global Skeptics in the pub, but it was a lot of fun to film too. A grand day out. I hope you all enjoy the spectacle and the fun of the Olympic Games. People from all around the world. And it just reminds me how nice it is to know people internationally. And if you've been having maybe visitors from overseas lately, I hope that went well for you. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the cool, windy Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to the people who listen after the music. Yes, let's do it. Let's play the dice game. Here's my Skeptic Zone notepad. My Skeptic Zone die here, D10. I'm going to roll this 3 times. Long-time listeners know I always roll it 4 times anyway. And this is the object of this is to use your magical, mystical powers or guessing to see if you can determine what number's going to come up. And I have my dice rolling machine here, courtesy of my friend Greg DeRay in the San Francisco Bay Area, who gave me this some years ago. Anyway, I'm going to roll the first number now. It's a number from 1 to 10. It's going to come up. I'm going to guess ahead of time. And I'm going to say 3 for the first roll. Here it comes. As a A380 or a 777 or something flies overhead. 8. Not even close. All right, second number coming up. Use your predicting power. Maybe you can use your psychokinesis and or telekinesis, isn't it? And make the die go a certain way. I'm going to say 7 this time. Here it comes. 4. Okay, well, that didn't work, did it? Last one of the initial 3. 9 is my prediction. Here it comes. And it's 4 again. Who's thinking about number 4? Stop it. Come on. You're skewing the numbers. Okay. And the supplementary. Rubbing that dice for good luck. As skeptics always do. 10. Why not? I'll say 10 this time. Here it comes. Here it comes. 7. Well, I did predict 7 for number 2, roll number 2. Today's winning numbers, if you're playing along at home, 8, 4, 4, and 7.